And yeah, so I've started recording here. Over recording and also share the screen. I think today is not a good day for MS Teams. No confusion, you could join, right? What do you see right now?
Your screen, sir.
My screen, so I can share the slides. Now we are on the Beamer slide, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So the main point that I was making was you have to show this equality on LP. Okay, LP. But at this stage in this proof, you are showing the equality on L infinity. But what is L infinity? What's the definition of L infinity? It consists of what kinds of functions?
Essentially bounded function.
Essentially bounded. But we are in the finite case. So essentially bounded is same as? No,
Bounded.
essentially bounded is essentially bounded only, right? Because on a set of finite measure, maybe it can be unbounded. That's okay. So yeah, so basically these are measurable functions with some boundedness property, right? And there you are going to show this by showing this equality on characteristic functions and then on simple functions and then by approximating to measurable functions. Okay. So somehow you will show this equality on L infinity at this stage. Okay, so there's a small check to be done, which I'm skipping. But finally you have to show all these things. You have to show that this G, where is this G now? G is in L1, right? This is from Radon-Nikodym. G is in L1. Yeah. You can hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So G is in L1, but you have to show that this G, you have to show surjectivity. So you have to show that this G belongs to LQ. Agree? Right? You have to show this. And you have to show that the norms are equal. The operator norm of phi G equal to the norm of G. You know one-way inequality. You know one-way inequality for certain kinds of functions. No, you know the inequality everywhere. You have to show the other inequality. And you also have to show that the agreement is on LP. Okay. So let's quickly do this. And then I want to do one more result today. So remember we are on finite space. And on a finite space, what is the most striking result that we have done in the initial lectures? We have already used it in Radon-Nikodym and many other places.
Holder-Minkowski equality, I think.
Holder and Minkowski and all are true even without finiteness, no? They are true everywhere.
Yes.
Jensen maybe you needed finite, Egorov you needed finite, but before that in the initial lectures, we had this important result, no, which we used in the proof of Radon-Nikodym and again in the proof of polar decomposition. I said you need to use it in one inequality. It did not have a name in Rodin, but we gave a name. Of course, you know this. From the integral being somewhere, you want to show that the function is there.
Oh, average.
Average.
That required finiteness, no? Crucially. That was only under finiteness assumption, right?
Yes.
So you use the average theorem. So I'm doing P equal to 1 and then this is how Rodin does it. And this is very nice way of dividing the proof. P equal to 1 only we are doing and then we have to do P equal to P is bigger than 1. Okay. So P equal to 1, what is Q?
Infinite.
What is Q?
Infinite.
Q is?
Infinite.
Infinity. And you know, right now at this stage on infinity, you know something more. Okay. That's why we are doing P equal to 1 and P equal to 1, use the average theorem. And modulus of integral is less than or equal to integral of the modulus No, modulus of the integral is equal to, what is integral g d mu? Integral g d mu is lambda of e, no? G is the Radon-Nikodym derivative of lambda, right? How did you get the G?
Yes.
This is from here. So integral g d mu is nothing but lambda of e, no? Yeah?
Yes.
And lambda of e is nothing but phi of chi e.
Okay.
Okay. So anyway, don't bother if you are not fully following, because we are deliberately going fast and you have to look at it again. So this is modulus of phi of chi e, and modulus of phi of chi e is less than or equal to norm phi, the operator norm of phi, times the one norm of chi e. Because phi is given to be a continuous functional on LP and LP is 1. Agree? This is the definition of a continuous linear function. It will be less than or equal to a constant, and the optimal constant is called the norm. So this is okay. And this is norm phi times what is one norm of chi e? It is just mu of e, no?
Yes.
Therefore, what can you say about the average? Average is 1 by mu of e times this, right? That is the average of g, right? So the average of g is less than or equal to norm phi. So from the average theorem, what can you say? So if the average, the modulus of the average is less than or equal to norm phi, meaning the average belongs to the closed disk of radius norm phi. So what can you say about the function? Almost everywhere.
Almost everywhere in that disk.
In that disk, mod g is less than or equal to norm phi almost everywhere. Okay. And therefore, the infinity norm of g is less than or equal to norm phi. What is the infinity norm? It is just a sup norm, no?
Yes.
So if mod gx is less than or equal to this, then the sup is less than or equal to this. Essential supremum it is.
Yes, sir. Essential.
So that will be less than or equal to this. Agree? Yeah. And
Okay, sir.
this is the other way inequality that we had to show, no? Because we have already shown one-way inequality, right? Did we show one-way inequality? Well, what we showed is this. Phi g is less than or equal to norm g. We showed. Right now we have shown norm g is less than or equal to phi. Norm of phi. Okay. But finally we will show phi equal to phi g. Therefore, this equality of the norms will follow. Agree? Other way inequality is what we are interested in. This inequality will follow because we are going to show phi equal to phi g, right? Therefore, from this inequality, norm phi less than or equal to norm g will follow. So for p equal to 1, we have shown the other way inequality. P equal to 1, we have shown the other way inequality that we had to show. And phi is yeah. So you might still say that phi is phi is defined on L infinity anyway, no, by this step, right? That's why p equal to 1 we have done first. By this step, phi equal to phi g we have already shown on L infinity. I did not give you the detail. Agree? So phi equal to phi g is shown on L infinity, which is q, and we have shown that norm of phi g less than or equal to norm g earlier, and right now we have shown that norm of phi is greater than or equal to norm g. That's what we had to show. Norm of phi is greater than or equal to q norm of g. So everything is done in this case, right? P equal to 1. Do you agree? Nothing else is to be shown. Everything is done when p equal to 1.
Yes.
Yes.
Because phi equal to phi g is already taken care of because on q is infinity. And now we are showing q norm of g is less than or equal to norm of phi, which is norm of phi g. And in general, by Holder, norm of phi g is less than or equal to norm of g, q norm of g. So everything is done for p equal to 1. When p is strictly bigger than 1, you're going to apply the polar decomposition. And you are getting polar decomposition, we did not call it at that time, but yeah, a measurable function alpha, mod alpha equal to 1 and alpha g is mod g. Right? This is what we did long ago, lecture 1. And you take En to be set of all x such that mod gx is less than or equal to n. And take a particular f. You might wonder, why such a complicated f, but this would be obvious if you look at the proof. Okay, it is manipulating some inequality. So this will be obvious. So take it for granted for now, because anyway we are doing it fast. So with this definition, mod f power p is mod g power q. Why? Because when you take modulus, this doesn't matter and this doesn't matter. So mod f power p will be mod g power p times q minus 1, but p and q are conjugate, so that is q. Okay. And therefore, if you take integral over En, okay, you have defined this En. Why did I take this En? This En has the property that in order to get E, in order to get full gx, full mod gx, you will just take union of En, right? I'm just, mod gx can be any value, and I'm taking this n disks, radius n disks. So on En, when you take mod g power q, what happens? Mod g power q is same as f times mod g power q is same as f times g. Why is that? Just check.
Yes.
F times g is this times g, but alpha times g is mod g. So alpha times g is mod g, so it is mod g power q minus 1 times mod g, which is mod g power q, and modulus of chi En is 1. So this is same as this. Okay, that is why you defined it this way on En, because outside En this is 0. So on En you have this equality, and this is same as phi of f. Why is that? Why is this true? You have to give some argument here, but easy. Why is phi of f same as this?
Because we are getting phi from Radon-Nikodym.
No. You are getting G from Radon-Nikodym. The element G,
Yeah, so G.
the G is from Radon-Nikodym applied to lambda is absolutely continuous with respect to mu. And what is lambda? Lambda is obtained from phi by lambda of E equal to phi of chi E. So suppose you have an equality. This is a function. This is something taking on f. This is also something on f because g is constant. G is given. So if you have to show this equality for all functions f, what is the basic idea? You show it on characteristic functions and see, no? So on characteristic functions, is this true?
Sir, we have shown that phi is equal to phi g, right? On
No. We have shown it on L infinity. Okay, fine, good. So you have shown that phi equal to phi g on L infinity. So if f is in L infinity, then this is true, right?
Yes.
If f is in L infinity, then phi of f is phi g of f. But what is phi g of f? It is integral fg d mu, integral is over x, no?
X.
But why is integral fg over x the same as integral fg over En? Because f has a characteristic function of En in it. Agree?
Oh, yes, sir.
Okay. So these two are equal for whenever f is in L infinity. And that is less than or equal to the operator norm of phi. Phi is on LP. So if f is an L infinity intersection LP, then I can apply this, right? And what will you get? You will get norm of phi times the p norm of f, no? You'll get p norm of f, right? Norm of phi times p norm of f. Phi
Yes.
of f is same as modulus of phi of f. Why is that? Phi of f is same as modulus of phi of f.
Because
Why
it is positive from first.
Why is phi of f positive?
It is integral over modulus of gq d mu.
Yeah,
Positive.
exactly. From the left hand side, we know that this is positive in this particular case. For this particular f, this is positive. So I have not put the modulus. So you can put the modulus. So modulus of phi of f is less than or equal to norm phi times the p norm of f. And the p norm of f is integral over en. Integral over x will be integral over en because characteristic function is there. Integral over en mod f power p d mu power 1 by p. But mod f power p is same as mod g power q. Okay. Now I have written like this so that you can take this to this side. So you will get 1 minus 1 by p here. So what you will get is integral over x chi en mod g power q d mu is less than or equal to norm phi power q. How do you get that? Take this to this side. So 1 minus 1 by p is 1 by q. Then raise to the power of q. Okay, and write the integral over x. So just manipulation, you will get this. So this is good by MCT. Okay, this is true at the level of each en. So if you apply MCT, chi en will where will chi en go to? It will go to the whole of chi x. No, it will go to constant function 1, right? Chi en in the limit is constant function 1. No.
Sir, so g is in L1, right?
G is in L1. Yes.
So it is finite almost everywhere. So it will increase to x.
Yeah. So this identity is fine. So by MCT, by MCT, correct. ENs are increasing, characteristic functions are increasing. This is in L1, so this is an increasing thing. So by MCT, you will get the inequality that this power integral of mod g power q is less than or equal to norm phi power q. So the q norm of g raised to the power of 1 by q, the q norm of g is less than or equal to norm phi. So what is the conclusion? The q norm of g is finite. Therefore, g belongs to
LQ.
G belongs to LQ. That is conclusion number 1. And conclusion number 2 is the other way inequality that you wanted anyway. Agree? Because the other inequality you had from Holder. If phi is phi g. We have not shown phi is phi g yet. That's the next slide. Okay. So right now what do you have? You have phi. You also have phi g. Both these agree on L infinity. Right? Both these agree on L infinity. And now, so we have in particular shown that G belongs to LQ. And therefore, you go back and check from Holder what do you get? Because G belongs to LQ, it follows that phi G is continuous on LP. Right? You go back to the initial thing. Whenever G belongs to LQ, phi G is continuous. Right? If G belongs to LQ, then phi G is continuous by Holder. Agree?
Yes, sir.
So we have shown that G belongs to LQ, therefore phi G is continuous. Therefore phi G is continuous. Phi is anyway given to be continuous. No, phi is anyway given to be continuous on LP. That's what we started with, right? Phi is from LP mu star. So what you have is both phi and phi G are continuous functions on LP, and they agree on, is it true that L infinity is contained in LP?
Because measure is of x is finite. So
because measure is finite. Okay. And then this is a dense subset. This is a dense subset of LP. And on this set, you have already shown that they agree. And these two are continuous functions on a set. On a dense subset, they agree. Therefore, they agree everywhere. Okay. So this is the proof. So the infinite sigma finite case, I'm just referring to this. It is some manipulation. Okay, so what is this thing that I'm referring? So there should be no gap here. It is 18, not 18. Page 10 of lecture 18. What could be the result? I'm saying sigma finite case, refer to this and argue as in Rudin.
Sir, construction of that W function.
Yeah, construction of the W function, which will bring down the sigma finite case to the finite and appeal to the finite case. Okay, so typo here is space. Was there another typo in the lecture till now? Is there anything else that I need to correct?
Lecture 20. Lecture 20. Written as lecture 19, but it is lecture
in the very first slide. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, fine. Okay, so is the structure of the proof clear? Radon-Nikodym, it's a beautiful application of Radon-Nikodym where given the continuous functional, using that you construct a measure, complex measure, apply Radon-Nikodym, get an L1G and show that it has all the properties in the finite case, and infinite cases reduced to the general sigma finite case is reduced to the finite case by that construction. Okay, let me also do, yeah, so I'll take maybe 5-10 minutes and do one more important result is there. Let me give a summary so that I can go to the next chapter in the next lecture. Okay, so page 10 of lecture 17, we just defined the total variation and we said that this makes it a nonlinear space. You recall this? The space of all complex measures, if you put the total variation measure as the norm of the measure, it becomes a nonlinear space. Okay, so remember this. And now again RRT. What is RRT?
G is representation theorem.
So we are going to have a new RRT and we have the old RRT. Okay, so the new RRT is what I'm stating. X is again locally compact Hausdorff. Okay, and then the nonlinear space, I am calling it RCBM of X. What is RCBM? R is M is measure. So what is R? If M is measure, what could be R?
Regular.
Regular. And C?
Complex.
Complex. And B?
Borel.
Borel.
So you consider the collection of all regular complex Borel measures on X. Is that a nonlinear space? Any collection of measures you can make it a nonlinear space, right? Well, not any collection. Any collection which forms a vector space, you can make a nonlinear space by the total variation norm. Agree? Space of all complex measures is a nonlinear space and this will be a subspace of that. So what you have to check is sum of two regular complex Borel measure is a regular complex Borel measure. Okay, that's easy. And this nonlinear space of all regular complex Borel measures. So this is a nonlinear space. And does anyone know the result here? This is naturally the dual of a famous space. So you know that the LP dual is LQ. Similarly, this particular thing, set of all measures, is the dual of a very famous nonlinear space. What is that nonlinear space? It is RRT. So what could it be?
L infinity, I think.
Not quite L infinity, but it's a good guess because it is very much connected to that. Now, if you recall, CCX, if you take, is it dense in LP?
Yes.
yes.
Provided P is? Provided P is P. Is it dense in LP for any P or only for some P?
Less than infinity.
Yeah, P not equal to infinity, right?
Yes.
So up to now we were doing P not equal to infinity. When P equal to infinity, what is the closure of CCX in L infinity? What is the completion of CCX in the infinity norm, in the sup norm? This was the last result that we did in chapter 3. In the sup norm, what is in the P norm, the completion of CCX is LP. In the sup norm, what is the completion of CCX? CCX is contained in L infinity, but the completion is a subset of L infinity. Subspace of L infinity. What is it? There was a notation, no? And we had a definition also. I mean, we had a notation and we had a definition of such functions. You can check your notes or check Rudin or try to remember. See, what is the notation CCX? Capital C and subscript small c and then x, no? Bracket x, right?
Yeah.
There was a very similar notation. In fact, you know, for me,
C0x, I think.
yeah, C0x instead of C0. In fact, I was going to tell you that yesterday in the night when I was typing, you know, I need specs, but I don't use one. I don't have one. But as soon as I'm back in Bombay, that's the first thing to do. Get, you know, go to an eye doctor and get specs. So, you know, I could not make out between CCX and C0x in Rudin's book. It is such a small letter. Okay, so it is not L infinity, but it is CCX, C0x that we are dealing with. So this is the dual of C0x. That will be a wonderful result, no? C0x is a natural. Is C0x a Banach space?
Yes, sir, maybe
Yes.
because it's the completion.
Yeah, it's a completion. So it's a Banach space. Is the dual of a Banach space always a Banach space?
Sir, dual of any space is Banach.
Dual of any space is Banach. So RCBM is anyway Banach. Therefore, C0, yeah, it's anyway Banach, and C0x is Banach, and the dual of C0x can be naturally identified with the space of all regular complex Borel meshes. So what do we have to show? In the spirit of LP dual is LQ, what is the result that we are going to show? Where should I give a map from where to where? Show that it's linear and show that it's injective, show that it's surjective, and it is an isometry. So where is the map from? From where to where are we giving a map?
It means RCM
C0.
RCBM
next to RCM.
to C0 dual of C0.
C0x.
To dual of
What is
C0.
your right side? What is your right hand side?
One side will be RCMBX and one side will be dual of C0x.
Correct. And now I am asking which one will you put on the left? Arrow is from where to where in our way of doing it.
Oh, so I will put RCMBM in the left and dual of C0x on the.
Very good. So given a measure, I will give a natural definition of a linear functional on C0x, which you can just integrate, right? So RCBMX to C0x star, I am giving a map. So this is exactly like LP to LQ star, LQ to LP star, right? So given an element of RCBMX, that is just a mu, a measure, right? I'm take f here and give a linear functional, which is just integrate f with respect. That's clearly a linear functional, no?
Yes.
Is it a continuous linear functional? Is phi continuous? That's also clear, right?
Yes, continuous clear.
Because phi of f modulus of integral, which is less than integral of the modulus. Take the essential supremum out, and you will get mod mu of x or something, right? Because mu is a complex measure, so you will have to write in terms of the total variation measure, and you will get mod mu of x or something which is finite. Okay, so continuity follows from that. And first of all, what do you mean by addition of measures? So if mu1 and mu2 are two measures, what is mu1 plus mu2 in terms of integration? That just means integral of f of d mu1 plus mu2 is integral f d mu1 plus integral f d mu2, right? That's the meaning of addition of measures. Okay, so you naturally get an element here. What do you have to show? Earlier injectivity was obvious, no? In LP star is LQ star is LP, injectivity was obvious. We had to show surjectivity. Here we have to show both. But again, injectivity is easy. So we have to show that this is an isomorphism. And what is the next line? We have to show injectivity. We have to show surjectivity. That it's linear is obvious, right? Mu going to this is linear is clear. Because if you have mu1 plus mu2, you have d of mu1 plus mu2. But the definition of measure is that is integral f d mu1 plus integral f d mu2. So that's okay. So you have to show injectivity. You have to show surjectivity. Yeah.
Continuity is not clear. Means
Continuity is not very clear.
Supreme-
Continuity is
Supreme-
not very clear. You have to check. So modulus of phi of s is modulus of integral f d mu. Okay,
Yes.
but d mu you think of as d mu you can write in terms of you use polar decomposition. So d mu is what? D mu is h times d mod mu, right?
Yes.
So this is integral fh d mod mu. Now when you put modulus less than or equal to modulus of the integral, see that we have always done for positive measures, not for complex measures. Modulus of integral is less than or equal to integral of modulus is for positive measure. So write
Yes,
this as
that's
h d
true.
mod mu, and then when you put, you will get integral of mod fh d mod mu, but mod h is 1. So you will get modulus integral of mod f d mod mu. Now mod f, the essential supremum, you can, that is less than or equal to, instead of mod f you can put the essential supremum and take it out, no?
Yes, and then we will get modulus of x, modulus of mu of x. So that will be
Norm
fine.
of f times mod mu of x you will get.
Yeah.
But mod mu of x is a constant, it's a finite constant.
Okay.
And that shows it is continuous in the supremum. You got a constant times the norm of C0x, no? Norm of C0x is a sup norm.
Okay, sir. It's clear.
Okay, so that is continuity. So you are using polar decomposition. Okay, so you have to show that it's injective, surjective, and you have to show its isometry. What is the meaning of isometry here? Norm of phi equal to
Norm. Yeah.
norm of mu. Norm of mu is nothing but mod mu of the total space. So you have to show
Yes.
norm of phi is mod mu of all of x. This is what you have to show, and this is the definition of, this is almost the definition of the measure, addition of measures, and for any bounded measurable f. Okay, so let me give the quick points and then we will stop so that next class we can start the next topic. Okay. So injectivity, suppose integral f d mu is 0 for all f in C0x. What do you have to show? If phi is 0, you have to show that the measure mu is 0. Okay, you have to show that the measure mu is 0. By Radon-Nikodym, there is a Borel function h. Oh, by the way, what is your sigma algebra? Why do I write Borel function? I write Borel function for instead of measurable function because your sigma algebra is the Borel sigma algebra. Okay, we are dealing with Borel measures. So your sigma algebra is the Borel sigma algebra. Script m is nothing but script b. So there is a Borel function such that d mu is h d mod mu. Now for any fn in C0x, you notice that mod mu of x is this one. Just check this. So this integral of h bar minus fn is just a function. You know, this n I have put just for fun. Not just for fun. In the next argument, it will be useful. This is just a function f. Take any f in C0x. I'm claiming mod mu of x is h bar minus f times h d mod mu. Why is that? Because this is h bar times h d mod mu, but mod h is 1. So that is just integral of d mod mu, which is mod mu of x. Okay. Next part is integral fh d mod mu, and I am claiming it as 0. Why is that? Why is that?
Because given condition, we suppose that.
Yeah, because h d mod mu is nothing but d mu. So integral f d mu is 0 for all f in C0x is given. That is a given condition, exactly. Okay, so with the given condition, this is 0 and this is just mod mu. So this is an this equality is true, and this is less than or equal to integral of mod h bar minus f in d mod mu, because mod h is 1. Now you will understand the meaning of the subscript, because C0x, h is a Borel measurable function, right? And you can approximate h using functions in C0x. Is that okay? In fact, any h can be approximated using simple functions, no? Correct? Any measurable function can be approximated using simple functions, right?
Yes.
And simple functions are in C0x anyway, no? Okay, so you can take a sequence in C0x which approximates this function h bar. If you do that, what's the meaning of this? This goes to, this becomes smaller and smaller, right? Yeah, if you take a sequence fn which goes to h bar, then this becomes smaller and smaller as n goes to infinity, right? Agree?
So, sir, we are taking Fn from C0x and here we are using.
I'm taking fn from C0x which converts to h bar.
But here we the given condition means integral over x. This is means convergence in L1 mod of mu.
No. I'm taking fn converging to h bar as point-wise convergence.
Okay.
Okay, but I may have something better than point-wise convergence. Simple functions converging to any measurable function, that is point-wise convergence only, right?
No, sir, it's bounded. H is bounded, so we can get a uniformly convergence.
Yeah, so you get uniform convergence using some one more idea. And once you have uniform convergence, it does not depend on the point where I do. So I can take the supremum, I can take the uniform limit outside, and that uniform limit going to 0, right? Because the convergence is uniform. So fn converging to h bar uniformly, so that limit is 0. So basically I'm going to conclude mod mu of x is 0 from that. Fn which goes to h bar, and that is essentially from Lucene. Okay, so I'm not using simple functions, I'm using Lucene. Because in Lucene I know that using continuous functions I can approximate. And Lucene has a nice inequality using the supremum. So therefore I get uniform convergence. Okay, so I made a small mistake. So using boundedness, you can get uniform convergence from Lucene, and therefore you get mod mu of x is 0. That's what you wanted. Okay, whatever. So that's injectivity. Surjectivity is the crucial point. So here is a crucial idea. Since this is called RRT, what do I want? Given a continuous linear functional, I want a complex measure, right? Associated to it, right? That is surjectivity, no? Agree?
Yes.
Now, given so I'm going to get a continuous linear functional. I'm going to be given a continuous linear functional, and I have to finally get a complex measure with which I will get the corresponding thing, right? So you will give me a continuous linear functional. I have to produce for you a complex measure. Since this is called RRT, what is going to help us is the old RRT where we have done all the hard work, right? But what happened in old RRT? In old RRT, what did you give me and what did I give you? In the old RRT,
with
what did you
functional
give
we
me
get
and what did I
measures.
give you? You gave me?
Measures and you give by functionals.
No, other way, no.
A given functional we can find measures.
Yeah, given a positive linear functional, what is the definition of positive linear functional on CCX? What is the definition of a positive linear functional? F is a complex function. But what is a positive linear function on CCX?
If x is greater than y, then f of x is greater than f of y.
Yeah, if if fx is positive, then lambda is a positive linear functional. Capital lambda was our notation on CCX. So if f is bigger than or equal to g, then lambda f is bigger than or equal to lambda of g. This is what you meant, maybe.
Yes. Yes.
So f bigger than or equal to g, what is Rudin's convention? When does he say two complex valued functions, one is bigger than the other? By convention?
They are real valued.
They are real valued, and then you have the inequality. Okay. So if you give me a positive linear functional, I will give you a positive measure, right? Positive measure, meaning 0 to infinity, infinity included, which satisfies all those properties. Complete, outer regular, inner regular on a certain set, and on compact sets it's finite. Agree? Yeah. So
Yes.
So now you are going to give me not a positive linear functional, but a continuous linear functional on C0x. Right? You are going to give me phi and C0x star. That is not a positive linear functional. That is a complex linear functional, but it is given to be continuous. Agree?
Yeah.
And I have to finally give you what? A complex measure. Such that all the matching happens. Agree?
Yes, yes.
So conceptually, the proof idea is the following. Okay, we are going to use old RRT. Given this continuous linear functional phi, guess what should happen in this slide. The slide is titled positive linear functional. Given this continuous linear functional, I should construct a positive linear functional on CCX. And then apply old RRT to that positive linear functional and get a measure satisfying the properties of the old RRT. That will be a positive measure. Okay. And then I will also apply Radon-Nikodym in a suitable way. I will also apply, I'll apply that. And then I will also apply LP dual is LQ technique. And using that positive measure appropriately multiplying by a function, I will get my complex measure. And I will say that everything is satisfied. Is the strategy clear? Given a continuous linear functional, construct a positive linear functional, apply old RRT, get a positive measure, multiply it with a suitable complex function, which will have all the properties. It will be a complex measure, right? If you have a positive measure and if you multiply by a complex function, that's a complex measure, no?
Yes.
Well, not quite. If you take a positive measure and multiply by a complex function, when will it be a complex measure? An arbitrary complex function, if you multiply, will it be a complex measure?
May not be.
But if you multiply by an L1 function, then will it be a complex measure? If mu is a positive measure and if I take g in L1 mu and if I take g d mu, is that a complex measure? Maybe not, right? Because I want integral. No, then it is, right? Because I want measure to be a complex number. But if g is in L1, then integral g d mu is finite, no?
Yes, I think.
Mod g is in L1, yeah. So integral g d mu will be a complex number, right? Because it's absolutely convergent. So that is the technique that we are going to use. So given phi and C0 x star, first of all, I will assume that norm phi is 1 without loss of generality by multiplying by a scale, because norm phi will be a positive number, divide by norm phi, right? I can assume norm phi is not 0, and then without loss of generality, you can assume norm phi is 1. And the idea is to construct a positive linear functional associated to this lambda out of phi and apply the old RRT. This requires some work. Okay, let me just give you the definition. Take CCX plus. What is CCX plus? What does this notation possibly mean? These are functions. Yeah, these are functions which will take non-negative real values. In general, CCX consists of functions which take complex values, but these are functions which takes non-negative real values. And on that, you define lambda f to be supremum of mod of phi h, where h is in CCX and mod h is less than or equal to f. Some definition, okay. Now the point is you have to show that this lambda has the property that it is linear. Lambda of f plus g is lambda f plus lambda g. Lambda of alpha f is alpha times lambda f is obvious. This requires some work, which I am skipping. This requires some work. Okay, it takes 3/4 of that page. Okay, it is an epsilon argument. Usual argument as in the proof of old RRT. As in, in many times you have used, it is less than plus, so you will show that lambda f1 plus f2 is less than lambda f1 plus lambda f2 plus epsilon, and that is true for all epsilon, that kind of an argument. Let's skip that. Point is, it is linear. And then, you will write a real function as f plus minus f minus and a complex function as u plus iv and extend it linearly, and you will get a linear functional on CCX. So this is something that I'm skipping. Okay, but the strategy is clear conceptually. Okay, so yeah, is there a question? Using the continuous linear functional, the continuity of phi will be used in this argument in order to show that this lambda is a linear functional. Okay, so given a phi, out of it you have constructed a lambda which is a positive linear functional. Okay, so you can show that it's a positive linear functional, and you also have this property for lambda using the fact that norm phi is 1. Mod of phi f is less than or equal to lambda of mod f, which is less than or equal to the sup norm. This is the sup norm of f. This is coming from the definition. Sorry, this is coming from the definition using the fact that norm phi is 1, right? Mod of phi f is one of the contributing thing, and this is a supremum. So this is fine, no? From the very definition, right? Because it's a supremum. And lambda of mod f is less than or equal to the sup norm is okay because what is lambda of mod f? Lambda of mod f is sup of mod of phi of mod f, no? Agree? Lambda of mod f is sup of all these things. So in particular, it is less than or equal to, no. In particular, no. Take any phi of h. Modulus of phi of h is less than or equal to the sup norm of h times the operator norm of phi, right? Agree? Modulus of phi of h is less than or equal to the operator norm of phi times the sup norm of h, no? You agree with that? Phi is a linear functional on C0x. It's given to be a continuous linear functional. Okay. So that means modulus of phi of h is less than or equal to the operator norm of phi times the sup norm of h. Sup norm meaning essential sup norm. Yeah. But you are assuming that the operator norm of phi is 1. So modulus of phi h is less than or equal to sup norm of h. And this is true at all levels. And therefore, by taking supremum, you will get this. Lambda of f is less than or equal to the infinity norm of f. Okay. So this much you have. Yeah. Is there a question?
No, sir.
Okay. So out of phi, you got a lambda. No, you got a capital lambda. Okay. This is capital lambda. One more typo. Out of phi, you got a capital lambda. And out of capital lambda, you are going to get a small lambda. What is this small lambda? This small lambda is the measure that you are getting out of the old RRT. This is capital lambda, and this is small lambda which you are getting out of the old RRT. Okay, and this lambda, what is the definition? This lambda on any open set, if you recall the proof of old RRT, on any open set this was a definition, no? Capital lambda will give you small lambda. This is how you define, right? Or f preceding x. What is this notation preceding x? F preceding v meaning 0 is
F.
less than or equal to f less than or equal to f. F is in CCX and support of f is contained in v. But v is my full space. So this is an f. 0 less than or equal to f less than or equal to 1. F is in CCX and this is supremum of lambda f, right? This is lambda of x. But if I have lambda f is bounded by this, right? Lambda of mod f is bounded by the sup norm of f, and from that it follows that lambda of x is less than or equal to 1. You agree? Because f is between 0 and 1. Therefore, the norm
Yes,
of
sir.
f is bounded by 1.
Yes, yes.
And here you have this property for lambda. Lambda of mod f is bounded by this, which is bounded by 1. Therefore, the supremum is bounded by 1. So lambda of x is bounded by 1. In particular, x is finite space. In fact, the measure of x is bounded by 1. Therefore, what can you say from the old RRT? The measure lambda from the old RRT was outer regular and inner regular on sets of finite measure, right? This was what we
Yes.
called M subscript capital F, which was precisely where it was inner regular. And then we proved in RRT, one of the steps, step 8 or 9 or whatever, we proved that MF, we characterized MF as exactly those sets of finite measure. So finite sets of measures of finite measure sets are precisely the measures where precisely the sets which are inner regular. So from the old RRT, it follows that lambda is regular. M is same as B here. Agree? Because the measure is regular if all sets are both outer regular and inner regular, right? But if the full set is finite measure, then any measurable set is of finite measure. So every set is inner regular also. Therefore, lambda is regular. Good?
Yes, good.
Okay. So lambda is regular. Now, modulus of phi f is less than or equal to lambda mod f is given to you, which is integral of mod f d lambda. Why? This is old RRT, no? Lambda is given by small lambda is old RRT. So this is just old RRT. And this is just the one norm of f. With respect to one norm in L1 lambda. One norm in lambda for any f in CCX. Because old RRT you can apply only for CCX functions. So for f in CCX, this is true. This one norm is with respect to the measure lambda. And what you can do is the given phi, which is defined on C0x, you can restrict to CCX and then extend to L1 because CCX is contained in L1. And this extension you can do in a norm preserving way because CCX is dense in L1 lambda. Okay, so you can extend to L1 lambda in a norm preserving way, and the corresponding operator norm is less than or equal to 1. That follows from this inequality. Because mod of phi f is less than or equal to 1 norm of f. Therefore, that constant is less than or equal to 1 when you take optimally. Okay, corresponding operator norm is less than or equal to 1. And therefore, what you get is phi of f is, yeah. So right now you have this phi which is defined on L1 lambda. Agree? And there the operator norm is less than or equal to 1. What do I mean by the corresponding operator norm? I am defining phi now on L1. Phi was defined on C0x. Now I am thinking of that phi on L1 lambda, and as a functional on L1 lambda, it has an operator norm, right? On the dual space of L1 lambda, there is a norm. No, that is a corresponding operator norm. And that operator norm is less than or equal to 1. This is what we concluded. See, the operator norm on C0x is given to be 1. Without loss of generality, we have assumed that. Here I am talking about another operator norm. This corresponds to the dual of L1 lambda. Agree? Is that okay? And this follows from this fact because it's less than or equal to 1 norm of f. Okay, maybe you have to look at it again, but this operator norm is not the given operator norm. It is the operator norm on the dual of L1 lambda. And that is less than or equal to 1. And I'm concluding that there is a g such that phi f is integral fg d lambda. Why is that? What is this g and where am I getting it from? So this phi is thought of as on the dual of L1 lambda. But what is the dual of L1 lambda? We have already proved what is the dual of L1 lambda. What is the dual of L1 lambda?
Sir.
Yeah.
That phi was defined on CCX. So we are using Hahn extension theorem.
I don't think you need Hahn-Banach because phi is, see, the CCX is dense in L1 lambda, no?
Yeah, so that's.
And this phi is
continuous.
Phi is continuous, but phi is continuous where? Phi is continuous on C0x, it is continuous on CCX. And
so
see,
sir,
suppose
phi is defined on C0x, right?
Yes.
So C0x will contain L1
No, I'm not saying that, because you don't have, finite measure or anything. I'm just saying that phi you can restrict your attention to CCX, which is contained in L1 lambda.
Yes.
Now, so the general picture is the following. You have W contained in V. V is a nonlinear space. W is a subspace. And you have an operator T, which is defined only on the subspace. But on the subspace, it is continuous.
And that subspace is dense in.
On the subspace, it is continuous as this identity.
Okay.
As a subspace of L1, it is continuous, this operator. Okay. So now extension, you don't need Han-Banach, no?
Just by the continuity.
Just by continuity, you define. So take a vector V, and you will get, density. You will get a sequence Vn which converges to that. So you define TV as limit of Tvn. Just by density.
And that will also preserve norm.
That will also preserve norm.
Okay, sir.
And having preserved norm, it will be a continuous functional there. Once it preserves norm, it will be continuous.
Yes.
Okay, so you don't need Han-Banach for this step. But if you use Han-Banach also, it's okay. Okay, but you don't need. It's just density. Okay. Therefore, you are saying that. So what is the dual of L1? So now phi. You are thinking of this phi as a member of L1 lambda star. But what is L1 lambda star?
L infinity lambda.
L infinity lambda. And that means phi of f is integral fg d lambda. There is a g which belongs to L infinity, right?
Oh.
But that just means a measurable function, which means a Borel measurable function because our sigma algebra is Borel. So you get a g, and mod g is less than or equal to 1. Why? Because the corresponding operator no, mod g will be the corresponding operator no. From LP dual is LQ. It is an isometry. Therefore, the infinity norm is less than or equal to 1, because infinity norm is equal to the highlighted norm. And that norm is less than equal. So sup norm is less than or equal to 1. Therefore, mod g has to be less than or equal to 1 almost everywhere, right?
Okay.
And if it is less than or equal to 1 almost everywhere, I can as well assume it is less than or equal to 1 everywhere. You can take such a function g. So assume mod g is less than or equal to 1 in this, because almost everywhere only will matter because integral is involved. And therefore you can take g with such that mod g is less than or equal to 1. Okay. So this identity is where? This identity is on CCX. Why is this identity on CCX? Because this part is only on CCX. Because old RRT is on CCX. So this is on CCX, but both sides are defined and are continuous on C0x independently. And therefore, by the density, you get the identity on C0x. Originally, the identity is only on CCX because old RRT is only on CCX. But both sides are defined and continuous on C0x. So by density, this identity is also on C0x. Okay, so phi f is integral f d mu. What is d mu? What is this measure mu? So I'm giving you the complex measure mu. What is the measure mu? Up to now, there is no mu in the picture. So what is my definition of mu? It's there in the slides. You just tell me. What is d mu? D mu is? Just compare, no? So what is d mu so that it is integral f d mu? D mu is? G times d lambda. D mu is g d lambda. So you have to check, and that also requires that mod mu of x is actually norm of phi. You can check this. Mod mu of x will be lambda of x because mod g is less than or equal to 1. You will use mod g less than or equal to 1, and from that you will get mod mu of x is equal to lambda of x, which is 1. Why is lambda of x 1? Because lambda of x is integral d lambda of
X is less
x.
than equal to 1.
Say it again.
Lambda of x was less than equal to 1.
Less than or equal to 1. Yeah, so there's a small
Right.
argument to show that it is actually equal to 1, which I am referring to Rudin. And that was by norm of phi without loss of generality. So this is the final thing that you want to show, that it's an isometry. So that also can be done. Okay, so I have, sorry, I had to do one way or the other. I thought, instead of going slowly explaining everything and proving just one theorem, I thought I will give you a bird's eye view of the whole thing, so that if interested, you can look at the details. And right, this may be a better idea when we don't have so much time, right? A lot of it we have done step by step. So, okay, so I exceeded time by a lot, but partly it was because of internet issues and MS Teams issues. So I can also stop recording. And anyway, it's lunchtime.